Where did they come from? Where did they go? We'll find out. Where are they now? Rightio. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you and welcome back to Where Are They Now? You will see the backdrop has changed for today. I have got rid of our standard yucky background, and because we have an Olympian on the show, I have changed it to the sporting precinct of Melbourne, Victoria, where Katie resides. Before we start speaking to Katie, I'm going to read through her bio and be as quick as I can because we have a lot of questions to ask Katie. So here we go on the bio. Born 3rd of October 1976, Katie is a highly regarded consultant and coach who has been working in senior management roles in organizational change, leadership development, and learning organizational development in organizations for over a decade. I've never said organization so many times in a sentence. She is experienced in formulating and implementing strategies that enhance individual, team, and organizational performance. Katie brings evidence-based research from academic studies and combines it with both elite sport experience as well as organizational experience from a range of sectors, including education, retail, utilities, government, insurance, and transport. Katie's approach is collaborative, systematic, and solution-focused. She leverages from strength-based approaches, positive psychology, and performance psychology to help others uncover and refine solutions with the aim of enhancing both performance and well-being. By building high-trust relationships, clients are supported to explore goals and opportunities for growth, as well as innovative ways to positively impact their surrounding systems. Katie's unique experience as a dual Olympian, which we'll touch on shortly, and international rowing coach has enabled her to understand the steps needed to perform on a world stage, and that she has most certainly done. She was ranked #1 in Australia for almost 10 years, one of the first females to become a head coach of the national rowing team, and has recently been granted the use of the purse nominal letters OLY as recognition for her contribution to the sport. Katie is now an ambassador for the Women's Olympic Network, one of 10 selected mentors for the Australian Olympic Committee, as well as a mentor for the Australian rowing team. She's busy. She is passionate about sustainable long-term performance and is currently conducting research on the topic of resilience at the University of Sydney. Katie holds a Master of Science Coaching Psychology degree from the University of Sydney, postgraduate qualifications in psychology from Deakin University, and a science degree from the University of Melbourne. Oh my God, someone's been extremely, extremely busy. Now, before we get on with everything else Katie done, she is also the founder of Go Wide, a platform to build resilience, which is www.go-wide.org. I'll put a little link in here shortly so everybody can go and check it out. An expert at multitasking, in addition to her consulting, coaching, lecturing, research, and studies, Katie provides pro bono leadership development to local schools and sporting clubs, and she is also married with 2 young girls. Before we introduce Katie formally, though, I've got a couple of highlights because whilst that gives a great bio to her, these are such important statistics. A dual Olympian, Sydney 2000, we'll touch on the Olympic Games shortly in Sydney, and Athens 2004, competed in 3 world championships, 4th in 1998, 5th in 1999, and 5th in 2003, won a silver World Cup medal and 2 bronze World Cup medals, won a gold medal at the Commonwealth Championships in 1999. As I said earlier, ranked #1 for nearly 10 years, winning over 10 national titles, and assistant coach on the Australian team. Most of all, the one thing you don't get credit for, Katie, and I think one of your strongest attributes, is we're related. You're my cousin.
We are.
Doesn't get better than that. All of those things mean nothing without me. Surely.
Should be front and center, shouldn't it?
I thought so. Firstly, Katie, welcome to the show. Thank you very, very, very much for coming on. I know how busy you are, and thank God you said you are an expert at multitasking, because that's one thing you would have needed to do to get here today, because I know you're juggling so much. How have you been?
I'm very well, thank you. And thanks so much for having me. Lovely to see you.
It shouldn't take this long. It's probably been 20, 30 maybe years since we've
I don't
seen
know.
each other.
We look the same.
We look the same. That's close enough. At the same time, we all very similar. I have been following you, as have all of our family and millions of people around the world have followed your career. What a career you had, Katie. It is amazing. Similar, and I said to you just post a pre-show, I didn't know as much about Mark Holden as I did till I interviewed him. Until you really do the research on how much someone's achieved, you've been extremely busy. I'm not sure you've had time to catch up with me.
Well, it's funny, isn't it? You kind of throw yourself into passions and things, and before you know it, 20 years has passed.
Yes, it is. It is really, really massive. I've got 15 questions. The format of the show is I have around about 15 questions. None of them are too hard hitting typically, but I'm going to start with the one that is top of my agenda. Please tell me what it's like to be an Olympian, to walk into a stadium, because every time I watch the Olympic Games, for me, it would be the equivalent of walking out as a test batsman for Australia, being an avid cricket fan. How does it feel? What goes through your mind building up to it?
Well, I certainly can't compare to being a batsman because I'm not an avid cricket fan, so we won't
Disappointing,
use
Katie.
any
That's
lingo there.
disappointing.
Do I get thrown off the show now?
No, not
Uh,
you've done enough.
It's funny. It's actually really quite hard. Well, I find it quite hard to put into words. And often when I think about, if people have asked me or peers of mine what it's like to be an Olympian, I think first thought actually goes back to the racing.
Right.
It's not, you don't think about the things like the McDonald's in the village or
There's a McDonald's?
There's a McDonald's. Well, there used to be. McDonald's in the Olympic Village. But I guess you spent so many years training for the race that you were there to compete in. And so in some ways, that's the non-glamorous kind of just the stuff that you've trained for. So I can remember clearly what the lanes look like on the rowing regatta and where all the markers are on the course. This isn't very interesting to other people, but to me, that's what it was about.
Wow.
But after saying that, one of my most memorable experiences was for the Sydney Olympics. So often rowing competes you start competing in the first couple of days of the Olympic Games. And so often rowers don't attend the opening ceremony of Fair Olympics because you kind of want to keep your adrenaline and your excitement plateauing, ready to race. But because it was the Sydney Olympics, we made a call and our coach agreed that once in a lifetime opportunity, we should be there. Absolutely. And we were prepared, we were told to keep adrenaline down and stay calm. And I'm pretty good at staying calm. And I remember waiting outside the stadium and you're kind of monitoring yourself. You're hearing, how all the countries are called and then they walk in country at a time. And because it was our home country, we were going in last. And so you get used to, it feels like the stadium is rumbling as you stand on the outside each time a country is called. And so you kind of adapt, go, okay, I can deal with this. I'm getting used to that. And trying to keep calm. And then I can remember where Australia was called. And I still, even now, get goosebumps thinking about it. It was like, I've never been in an earthquake, but I imagine in a non-fatal one, it was like that. It was like the ground underneath us was rattling. The roar of the crowd was unbelievable.
Wow.
And so just to, take those first few steps and walk through a tunnel to go out into that space, it was just, undescribable. That amazing support. Yeah.
And walking around, the crowd must have been, it was such a big thing to get the Olympics, in your lifetime as a spectator. So as an Olympian, and the amount of, freezing cold mornings you must have trained, and, all of that nearly seems like payday, I'm sure, in some respects.
Yeah. And it does. But then, of course, you still have, well, I certainly still had, it was kind of only in hindsight that you can really appreciate how amazing that was, because even though I couldn't control the feelings and the emotion around that moment,
Yes.
you're still trying to kind of keep it at bay, like normalize it. It's okay. I'm cool and calm. And, I don't want to use my energy. I'm going to save it. So it's only when you kind of, well, for me, when I step back and look at it, and these things that were just part of what you did in those days, is like, wow, the kinds of people that you get to have conversations with and
Yeah.
engage with, and the amount of support that you have is just phenomenal.
I was watching an interview you did the other day with a fellow rower, and it was really good. And I'm not sure whether I read it or then heard it on there, but you were giving it away at one stage. You felt like you'd peaked. Was that in high school?
Yeah, it was.
You're
Yeah,
you're at
year
boarding
10.
school. You felt like you had peaked and you'd done all you could do, and
Mm.
then so much has come after that.
Mm. And I think you're absolutely right. So in the school, I went to school in Ballarat. So
Yep.
for those from Victoria, might know where that part of the world is.
Mhm.
And it's enormous in Ballarat, and I think it is in Melbourne and Sydney. You have these races, head of the rivers or head of the lakes, where I'm from. And when you're a school kid, it's like it's the be all end all. I assume there's a cricket equivalent, is there?
Yeah,
Or
in a
not?
grand
I
final,
don't know.
maybe, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's a
Um,
total. I can't even put myself in the same sporting context. I'm sorry, it's not even
oh
possible.
well,
Mhm.
we'll we'll move on then. But yeah.
We'll let that go. Um,
Yeah.
one of the things about being an Olympian, I'm sure, is the dedication you give to that sport is going to teach you some fundamental great things. Now, this show is all about where are they now, and we'll talk shortly about what it is you do now. But I've also seen that you've been over in Ireland coaching. You're the head coach in Ireland, is that correct?
Yeah, of the under 23s and juniors. Yeah.
How do you find you were received overseas, and how did you find your overseas working experience? Because it's a pretty good attribute to have when you're going to go into business later in life and be a mentor and a coach.
Yeah.
How did you find your overseas experiences?
Yeah, it was really interesting, and the one I might actually draw on that question. So after the Sydney Olympics, I had planned to take a couple of years off. I was
Mhm.
young and arrogant, thought I could just step away and come back in. Wasn't quite that
You would have earned
arrogant,
it.
but I understood. I felt that I needed growth beyond the sport to come back and be even better at the
Yep.
sport. Anyway, so I was offered a job in the Netherlands after the Sydney Games. And so I went over there, and probably a bit naively, growing up, I've been fortunate to live in a number of countries around the world. So, there I am, as I can't remember how old I am, 23 or something, thinking, oh, I've lived in various places. I know a bit about rowing. I'll be fine. And of course, what I didn't consider was I was moving overseas by myself. So, mum and dad weren't finding the house for me and all those things you take for
Yeah.
granted. But secondly, initially, in those first little bit, I wasn't well received,
Oh,
from that particular, it was a university. I was the head coach of men. And what they saw was a female coming in. So this is, 20 years ago,
yep.
not common. Female, young, um, and I spoke English, not Dutch. And so in those initial weeks and months, the athletes were very supportive.
Yep.
The coaches became supportive, but my bosses, which were like the board of the club, um, really, in hindsight, made things really difficult. They'd hold meetings in Dutch so that I couldn't understand it and couldn't make decisions, etc.
Wow.
But again, like any of these kind of moments in life, that you look back and it's like, well, hang on, if I can navigate that in a different part of the world and earn trust of people that didn't want me there. Either I took their job or I took one of their mates' jobs, and you've got it all up against you. And if you can work hard and earn that trust in that environment, then surely the next time, I found something, came against a challenge, I'd think, okay, I've done something like this before.
Yeah.
And, we'd all have that, wouldn't we? Those experiences you can draw on when things feel tougher.
I was in a seminar this morning,
Mm,
which I was just doing a personal growth one I do each year. And in the seminar this morning, it says, unless you've failed, you can't have learnt anything. It's physically impossible. If you've been put in a situation which is outside of your comfort
mm,
and you feel that you're being hard done by, that is where you will learn. You can't buy experience. It's impossible. And your experiences and reading through, a fair bit of research over the last couple of weeks about everything you've done. It's huge. You will have seen I've stalked your LinkedIn, I've
mm,
stalked your Facebook, I've stalked everything, but like, you can't buy those experiences. And now that you've gone into the business and the corporate world,
mm,
I think the experiences you've got that you can pass on are going to be magical for someone that can't get those experiences.
mm,
And certainly in business, the one thing I think I've done, I've had to reinvent myself a couple of times from the corporate world of Caterpillar, traveling around the world and being on a plane to Singapore today, Perth tomorrow, Sydney the next day,
mm.
and trying to get family life in there. It's very difficult. And my advice typically is plan your time. Plan
Yeah.
your time, plan for some downtime, and most certainly prioritize family. And if I know you're out there speaking on this topic all the time with what you do, and you've studied it, it's
Mm.
amazing. I think the things you've got out of that career must be just an abundance, and anybody that takes any part of that on from you will most certainly benefit.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
all right,
And I
hard.
should say, I
What's
was
that?
going to say,
Sorry.
I should say in there too that, I'm really mindful that, I'm using an example like going overseas. And as much as that can be a challenge, I've also been really lucky to have those kind of opportunities. And,
Yes.
I'm sure you and I meet some amazing people where, maybe they haven't been to an Olympics or haven't been overseas, but they've come up against some stuff.
Oh,
And the
some
amount that, those people can teach us is, yeah,
some people have had extremely tough lives
yeah,
and they're different experiences, and this is what collaboration is about
yeah.
with networks. And for me, I most certainly find that being able to call on all my different experiences, I've made some great friends around the world. I'm sure you have as well. I'm certain you have, and
Mm,
it's so good to have a network, and that's what I certainly like
absolutely.
about LinkedIn as an example. All right, so I'm going to get into the tougher questions.
Oh, okay.
what what was your greatest success that you look back on, and then what is the greatest failure you've looked back on? And failure doesn't mean it had to be bad, or
Mm.
I missed a call one day, but what's your greatest success that you look back on? And it doesn't have to be a goal. It might be something you just go, gee, I really got something out of that, and something that failed and that you were able to pull something out of.
Mm. Probably a sign of my personality that I'm going to start with the failures.
Hmm. No,
And
that's okay. That's a good thing.
so many, so many. But what's really interesting is if I think about it, particularly in the rowing context, is at the time I failed a lot. Yet I never actually saw any of those moments as failures. And as you talked about, obviously we learn from them. But I think one of the things, particularly in that world, in that rowing world, is I spent a lot of time thinking about the task at hand and what are some of the ways that I could do that task or that piece of work well. And when you spend that time thinking about, as what's that expression, there's more than one ways to, is it skin a cat? But anyway,
Yep.
there's lots of ways of doing things. And so then when it came to performing, I wouldn't necessarily see myself as failing at something.
Yep.
I'd step back and think either I chose the wrong way, to do something out of my choice of 3 or 4, I chose the wrong one, or the one I chose, I didn't do it well enough because I hadn't practiced it enough or I wasn't experienced enough yet. And so it kind of took me out of the picture and became more about, okay, I messed that up today. I got really bad feedback about that, whatever it might be. I lost that, piece in a competition. Next time I'll choose a different way of doing it, or I've got 2 weeks to get better at doing it the same way. And it kind of made it simpler. And so, I have to admit I'm not always as good at doing that these days. I don't, life is more complicated than it was in my sporting days. But it's certainly something I try and replicate, that it's not me as a person. It's not my personality. It doesn't make me a bad person. It's just the way I did that thing.
It's hard to deal with it sometimes, isn't it? Because so many things can come in at the same time. And I mean, people often say to me, you've got good time management, Daz. How do you do it? And I say, I'm going to sound like I'm really dumb here. You guys are expecting some whiz bang answer. I whiteboard everything. I have a whiteboard next to me. If it's not on the whiteboard, it's out of my head. And you've got to break it down to simple. I'm sure you agree.
Absolutely. And that came down to, in a rowing world, you'll get to see just kind of how dorky I was about it all. Every single night I'd reflect in a structured manner about what I did that day. And it was, as straightforward sometimes as, what did I do well? What can I do more of from that? What didn't I do so well? Will I change tomorrow? And by the night before, I had very clear goals for the next morning. The next morning, I'd read that first up. What are my goals? What's my plan to do that? I'd go and give it a go. That was session 1 for the day. Then you get to morning tea time or break, and I'd review it again. And it just kind of kept it simple. You just keep moving. And so, good or bad, you were growing and getting better. And that was really my goal all the time. I didn't necessarily think about being the best. I thought about the international competition. The people I was up against had, in some cases, 20 years more experience than me.
Yes.
So I wasn't going to be the best straight away. It was about, how do I learn faster than them?
Yep.
And then I knew I'd catch them and
Yeah.
overtake them eventually.
I love the word simple in there. You said it a couple of times, because it is, we overcomplicate things as humans. This little computer we've got up here can make an absolute mess of things. That being your failure, what's your greatest success? What do you look back on as your greatest success? Hard to pick one, I know.
Well, it's funny. I don't necessarily think about events as such, like it's not necessarily a race or something. I think for me, the success has been the stuff that I've learned that has led to me performing over time.
Yes.
I'm not sure if I've said that very well. So success for me through rowing, one of the key things I learned is what I just talked about, that I can learn fast.
Great.
And so that I see as a success, because I've been able to take that, as we all can, into a new workplace, something new you're trying, or goodness, the day I came home with a new baby and I'd never been a mum before and I felt overwhelmed. It's like, okay, just one step at a time, reflect when you can, when you're sleepless, etc. So that has been a success, because it's lasted me a lifetime, and I think will continue to benefit.
I love that that's your success story. And it's not a gold medal, or it's not a title, and for some people it is, and that's okay as well. But I love that you're saying my success is virtually me, who I am, who I've become, and all the things I can learn from them. Because I was with a fella just before, and he said to me, why are you doing the show, Does? Like, what's the theory behind the show? I said, why not? It's something I've wanted to do. It's a good way of connecting with all the people I know. And so many people ask me, what does your cousin do now? Or what does Jamie Church do now? What's Mark Holden doing now? And what a great way of giving them the answer, because I think the experiences we tend to get as we all get a little bit older are so valuable for everyone. And it's a great way to connect people.
Absolutely.
Okay. You can tell me 1, 2, or 3 people that have changed your life, influenced you, that you look back on comfortably as going, wow, that I find that really influential?
It's a pretty easy one for me.
Good.
And, others that I've spoken to in my lifetime would already know this, that my dad was a huge influence.
Mm.
So dad and I were very close. Uh, but so that's great. But where the influence came, and probably connects to what we were just talking about, I would now describe him as being curious. I wouldn't have used those words back then, but that desire to learn and improve, not necessarily for winning things,
Hmm.
but just that internal want to find out more. And so for me growing up, at times it drove me insane when I wanted an answer to my homework. And, I'm showing my age here, but he'd say, oh, let's look at the Britannica encyclopedia together. And you'd be
You
like,
are showing your age.
yes, Google, no. Um, but, I know back then all I wanted was the quick answer, but
Yeah.
it was not only that he was teaching me to go and find out things, but I think he actually genuinely loved it too. Like,
Yeah.
oh, let's find this out together. Um, so there was definitely that love of learning. But the other thing for me is that he took risks. And that's always sat with me, those moments in life where, you kind of feel like the best thing to do might be to keep the job that you hate, or to, be in a relationship that you're not happy in, or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Whereas dad role modeled trying things out, taking hobbies that were out of the ordinary and just having a go at things.
Yeah.
A massive, massive influence on that
Yeah.
front.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys got to travel a lot with your dad, who unfortunately passed
Yeah.
away quite young.
Yeah.
But he was a pilot. You guys
He
had
was.
the
Yeah.
glory of traveling around him, and sometimes you must have thought this sucks having to move and that. But you got some good experiences out of that. You would have learned from his experiences.
Absolutely. So even, my memory of that, and so two things. One, my sense, and of course, it's my memory of the way dad told the story, is we moved not necessarily for higher credential roles, etc. My sense of it was that we moved because there was a particular aircraft that he wanted to learn to fly. And so in those days, probably similar now, different airlines had different aircraft. So again, it kind of showed that genuine, I love flying, how can I learn more and play with the idea? And if I think about in one of the countries we moved when I was about 11 was a country called Brunei, which in those days, I think, I was the only person with blonde hair in the country. And, I remember back then I went to a school where they didn't even speak English for, felt like 6 months. It could have been less. And now that I'm a mum, I think, wow, what an enormous risk. I'd probably be wearing my worrying hat of what will happen to my children. Whereas it was an amazing learning experience. I learned that I can get behind sometimes in class and I'll be okay. Life goes on. You'll have an opportunity to catch up if you put your head down, and you can build relationships with people that don't necessarily speak the same language as you, and all of those things that was just part of how I grew up. So
Yeah, my experience
amazing,
with
man.
Brunei was there's no alcohol.
Yeah.
I stopped there on a connecting flight to Ireland when I was heading over for some mining equipment, and I wanted to get a drink, and I was like, no alcohol. Okay, I actually thought the person was joking with me, not having any idea. I'd never flown Air Brunei. I think they had a business class flight that was half the price of anyone else. So I went with them, and I was like, what? They go, no, you have to wait till you get to Dubai. I was like, oh. Well,
Absolutely.
you were too young to be drinking alcohol back then.
Well, I was, but in the equivalent of those days, is it was when we were there that it was the first time that somewhere opened that you could buy a hamburger. So, at 11, years of age when your treat was something like a hamburger and you move to a country and you can't even get them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That is. Tell me this, Katie, what does Katie Foulkes do on her perfect day off?
Well, it's a bit concerning, my answer to this, because I don't really have days off.
If you had
But
one, if I said whatever it takes, here's $5 million, have the weekend off, what do you do?
$5 million. Did I tell you I'm really good at spending money?
Yeah.
No,
I think it's our family thing.
yeah. Yeah. Do you know what's funny? I think the perfect day off, there'd be lots of ways of spending it, but again, I'm going to use the word simple. It would be, some of my favorite things in the past. I've been married to Paul, my husband, for 10 years. We, really close, great friends, best friends. So it would be doing something like, I don't know, wandering around Melbourne or Sydney together, good coffee in hand.
Yeah.
And just kind of, when you're in a place I often find this when it's not home, your imagination starts sparking of what could the future look like? Where could we go? Maybe not so relevant at the moment, but that kind of, you're out of the busyness of life and you're kind of thinking about possibilities.
It's ironic because the question, when I asked people, and we've only got, I think, 2 or 3 episodes left to film in this first series, is everybody says, I don't get days off. I don't get days off. Paul Mercurio said the other day, I don't get days off. Like, I don't think of it. I'm an actor, like, and been in dancing. There's no such thing as a day off because you're always looking for your next gig.
No.
It's not a Monday to Friday job. And I'm pretty certain, without asking, my sister's perfect day off is a book in a park with everyone leaving her the hell alone.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's funny that we don't prioritize those things. And when people say to me, how do I self-improve? I say, by taking time off. Even if you take an hour to go and sit somewhere on your own on a park bench in somewhere you've never been, because I reckon my best ideas, my best thoughts, my best self-help comes from those alone times.
Absolutely.
But each their own. Tell me, what is Katie Foulkes doing right now? So if someone said, well, I've loved everything I've heard about Katie, and her bio tells me she's heavily qualified in everything. Mm-hmm. If someone wanted to utilize your services, what is it that Katie does now?
So I wear lots of hats, but the summary version. So I help people. So that can be individuals, groups, teams, or entire organizations to perform in a sustainable manner. Mm-hmm. So that's a bit of a mouthful, but what that looks like, I work with individuals and do executive coaching. I work with teams and coach the teams as a whole. I consult into organizations and leadership development or change or making it a great place to work. And then probably my favorite part of all of that is I'm such a dork. I learn. So I'm doing research, I'm doing team coaching accreditation at the moment, I'm doing coaching, other training, but I love the ongoing learning that comes with that I have a good excuse to do nowadays.
I have seen, and I worked at Caterpillar for many years, 8 or 9 years, and there's hundreds and hundreds and thousands of staff. And we would get in some people to do exactly what you do, come in and consult or coach. And I typically would have much preferred to have somebody with experience outside of the field of machinery and equipment. So I think there's a lot of benefits in you going into a Caterpillar, or it doesn't even have to be a massive organization like that. An organization that can do with some change just to understand from another perspective. And I think that's really important. And I visited your website, etc., and we'll put a little link up here shortly, and we'll touch off on that at the end of the show. But what you're doing is passing on a wealth of knowledge that people just can't get any other way. And I think you got to be pretty happy with what you've achieved to date.
Thank you. I think also So of course, yes, I have some experience, but a lot of my learnings and knowledge are from those that have studied it for lifetime. So I'm stealing their stuff. But the other thing which I love in workplaces, and I'm sure you found this in Caterpillar, is sometimes, in these big organizations with the structures that we have, and we're all so busy, you can kind of miss finding out the amazing experience and knowledge that already sits within the organization.
Yeah.
So that's some of my favorite work is actually, sure, I might come in with some good evidence of what works really well, but then part of it is also going, okay, but what else can we learn, and what can your people teach you about, whether it's that particular piece of machinery or the culture or whatever it might be. And goodness, there's some amazing stories that sit in them already. It's just tapping into that.
Yeah, it definitely all ties into each other. I've heard a million times in my life, and I know you most certainly would have, is people that said, "Oh, I'm too tall to do this, or I'm too small to do something." Now, how tall are you, Katie? Because you are quite short.
How can you tell that via Zoom?
Well, because I've seen you, I've seen your mum, I've seen my mum, and
Yeah.
they're all sporting. My sister, no one's sporting more than 5 foot, so you must be
I'm
very
just
close to it,
over.
just
I'm
over.
just over
So
5.
just over 5 foot, you're probably thinking as a young, at a younger age, where do I slot in here? This
Yeah.
opportunity comes up for you to get involved in something. Unless you put yourself out there,
Mm,
you just don't find these opportunities. So, I mean,
mm.
what would your advice be to somebody wanting to get into rowing today? They're at school, or they've decided, I want to be a rower. What advice would you give them?
Mm. Goodness, where to start? So I think a couple of things. Firstly, I imagine that there's going to be some school coaches that disagree with this, but my advice would be to tap in. Is it rowing, or is it sport, or is it being with people and being in a team? So trying to find out, which might be about trying a whole lot of activities,
For sure.
sport, music, whatever, find out what actually is it. So I love rowing, but the part that's continued me on since that is what I realized over time is I love learning. You probably got that sense through this, and I had to do that
Very
through
clear.
rowing. Yeah. I love thinking about how people get better at things. So that tapped into rowing, but it tapped into all kinds of things.
Does.
And I love working out how teams and groups perform.
Yes.
So I kind of got lucky that I had an opportunity in rowing that those pieces came together. But I could have potentially had the same satisfaction or passion for lots of things that they fit in.
Mhm.
So that would be part one of experimenting and trying things out to see what works for you. And secondly, then whatever you do, put some structure in the learning, because you may not be the tallest person,
Mhm.
and therefore you might not make the top crew straight away, and you may never make the top crew.
100%.
But if you are learning and learning fast and being quite structured about the way you do that, you will get off the water after every race and feel fabulous because you've done the best that you can. I know that's cliche. We all heard that when we were growing up, but it's actually true.
I think that most certainly in sporting, and two totally different parallels between you and I only ever played local sport, but I loved it. I honestly feel like I finished it and gave it my best. My eldest son, Brandon, who's
Mm,
nearly 17 in a couple of days, he's an athlete and he's a very good soccer player and so forth, but there's no guarantees you're going to get to the top
oh,
level. So you've really got to enjoy it and get the best out of it you can.
absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
and your two little beautiful girls tell me they're too young to have chosen their career. Have they shown any interest in rowing at all? Have you given them any intro? Have you bought them a little rowboat to begin with? Anything?
Well, our eldest, I was coaching a little bit when she was born, and we were very, very lucky. One of the schools I was coaching for, they they just took this little baby under their wings. And so I was specifically coaching a boys first crew. So if you imagine, 16, 17-year-old boys, as you would know,
Yep, yep.
we went up to a national championships, and they came to see her with a rowing outfit. It's called a zootie. And somehow they had ordered this teeny tiny little rowing
No.
suit for her. So she's definitely had some exposure to it. But, I think similarly right now, I mean, they're really young. It's just about, I'm just hoping that they'll enjoy being active to some degree. But they are involved right now. They do ballet, but then my husband's got involved in jiu-jitsu recently, and they've started that. So it's just opportunities and fun, isn't it?
It's what it's about. I can't let you go without two questions. I'm not sure whether you've seen, I posted the other day that you were coming on the show on the Where Are They Now Facebook page, and asked if anybody had questions to send them in to me. The question is, sorry, and I'm reading from the notes at the same time.
Good.
Can Katie explain how she got a rowboat named after? I'm not sure it's a rowboat. What? So you have a boat with your name on it? Is that what you call it? A rowboat? I'm really not
Boat.
a rower.
Yeah, boat.
How did you get a boat named after you?
Good question. Well, the way it was portrayed to me, so it was the school that I went to, Ballarat Grammar, big rowing school. And I think it was, goodness, my take on it was a bit of a tribute to someone that had been successful and, gone through the school and gone on to achieve more. But certainly the focus of it during that day when it was it's called christened, was not so much again about the achievements, but about, I guess, being a good team player along the way and being a good leader. The focus wasn't on the two Olympics.
Yeah.
So
it must be a great feeling to have a boat with your name, and I utilize that photo on the Facebook post because, even just as a cousin, it was a very proud moment. Even watching you go to the Olympics and following, and being a bit of a spud sportsman myself, it was great to say, well, someone in the family's got ability. We can't be all duds, but it must be a great feeling when you see your boat with your name next to it, and
it's
it must
lovely. But I think the biggest honor was that it was more than 20 years ago that I went to school there, and they still see me as part of the community. I get invited to the boat sheds, not because they necessarily want me to do something for them, but because I'm part of that club.
Yeah.
And that's what, sport or many things can bring, can't they? That network and that connection, support.
The second question was, is Katie still involved in rowing? And if so, where? And if not, will she become involved in rowing again? Now, there's a wink at the end of it, and they asked me not to say who they were. So I don't know what that's about. Is someone trying to get you on board? Are you still involved? Talk to me.
I'm not involved, although I do. Some of my coaching clients are elite athletes, so I'm involved in that a slightly more distant capacity. I jumped back in a boat a few years ago for the World Masters we're on in Australia, actually just down the road here in Ballarat. So we pulled together a crew of my various Olympic teammates, which was good fun.
Yep.
But no, apart from that, I'm not involved. And don't really intend to be.
So it's a big commitment, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's also, why am I not? So a couple of things. This is terrible. I don't really when people say about you can just do it for fun.
Yep.
The fun for me was going really fast. And in my view, you can't go really fast until you're willing to put the hours in and the commitment. So I have other commitments now that fill up those hours.
Yeah, and that's great. And once you've got a family, all your priorities change and everything. Yeah. And it's fair to say, Katie, your career's been amazing. Yeah. And I'm sure you'll sit down and have a cup of tea one day and just go, wow, I've actually achieved a lot. If you haven't done that already, you really have. I'm certainly proud as a cousin, but more so all Australians are proud of what you've achieved, and you should be very proud of yourself. In addition to that, you've gone on and completed all of these studies and now are in a situation where you're willing to give it back. What's the website address where they can contact you if they want to get in contact with you to get you involved in their organisation?
Yeah, so it's actually my name. So it's www.katiefoulkes.org, and Katie is Katie, and Foulkes is F for Fred, Oulkes.
And I'm going to put a link somewhere in here over the next hour or two when we do the editing before we go live. Katie, thank you so much for joining me today. I have been excited about this. Family's been contacting me. Friends that I've spoken to you about forever going, oh, I can't wait to see what she looks like. Can't wait to see her. So it's really, really exciting. Thanks for coming on our first episode. The success of this show is about having a bit of a mixture of different people. You're in great company. I'm sure you watched Young Talent Time when you were growing up.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure if you're into boxing, but we've got two amazing world title boxers in Sam Solomon and Barry Michaels. Holly Brisley's just agreed to come on. Every male in Australia is going to be extremely excited for that one. Yes. Mark Holden, Mick Thomas from Wedding Parties, anything. The company is amazing, and you deservedly sit atop all of that. So
that's very kind. I'm very flattered to be involved. So
thank you very much, and I hope all goes well. And anything we can do to promote it for you on our Where Are They Now site, you just let me know, and we'll make sure we get it done.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us, Katie Foulkes.
Thank you.